Thank you. No, you're so excited, everybody. See this ugly mug. I know. Okay, that's enough. Anyways, last video made on reading a little bit from Externalization of the Hierarchy, the Return of the Christ, or whatever the heck. Resurrection of the Christ, the Return of the... I'm having a brain fart. Oh, the Reappearance of the Christ. Yeah, the Reappearance of the Christ, and education in the New Age, showing that the Lucis Trust is not just some hippie, well-to-do, innocent, well-meaning organization that is just talking about how they love humanity and want everybody to hold hands. I showed that they are really, Alice Bailey and, well, the Baileys in general, they were the ones uttering that phrase, New World Order, long before. Let's see if I can turn. There we go. Long before George H.W. Bush called for the New World Order. We're led to believe that by some people, the media did that for a long time, throughout the 90s and 2000s, that was a phrase that was just coined by George H.W. Bush. Well, when you research, you find out that the ones that coined that phrase were members of the secret societies and the New Agers, the top New Agers. So we have another one. Manly P. Hall, Order of the Quest. And some interesting things that he says in here. So that's why I wanted to read, and it'll again help with the accumulate as much facts and proof as I could possibly do to show and demonstrate that this that there is a conspiracy among secret societies, and that I guess people better wake up to that and realize that we're being played, like, you know, on their chessboard. So, yep. So this book came out in well, it says 1996, but he was long dead after that. I can't find the title page. I got this book from Amazon. It's not in the best shape, but I got it because it was the cheapest. Orders of the Quest to Holy Grail, Manly P. Hall. So let's read this. In this outline of the Adepta tradition as it has descended through the mystical associations and fraternities of Europe, we are developing our subject material according to a definite plan. The details and particulars will have fuller meaning if the underlying principles are first appreciated. The present section deals with the period extended from the collapse of the pagan mysteries to the end of the age of chivalry. For practical purposes, the esoteric schools, which champion the human cause through the Dark Ages in the medieval world, may be considered together as the Orders of the Quest. The symbolism and rituals of these fraternities of the Middle Ages involved a search for something remote or hidden. To succeed in the quest, the knight or companion, disciple, must dedicate himself to the service of his afflicted and exploited fellow man. He must rescue his own soul, the fair maiden in distress, by overcoming the giants, dragons, demons, and wicked nobles who pillaged the countryside. As a reward for these noble pursuits, the Christian and godly knight could aspire to a heavenly vision of spiritual mysteries. The legends of chivalry are veiled accounts of man's eternal search for truth. These beautiful stories are not, however, merely folklore. They are part of an orderly tradition unfolding through the centuries and bearing witness to a well-organized plan and program. Like the myths of classical antiquity, the hero tales are sacred rituals belonging to secret fraternities, perpetuating the esoteric doctrines of antiquity. An attempt to trace the descent of the adept tradition through these centuries of almost complete secrecy is exceedingly difficult. The initiates cannot reveal their true identities, their places of habitation, or the programs they were seeking to advance. Most names which have descended to us are pseudonyms, the locations imaginary or deliberately falsified, and the projects themselves concealed under extravagant fables. Unless the student has some sympathetic grasp of the situation and has trained himself to observe landmarks, he can discover little of genuine significance. It has seemed advisable, however, to approach the subject in a sober and factual manner. We have purposely avoided such reports and accounts as depend entirely upon extrasensory perception of their validity. We are fully aware of the so-called clairvoyant investigations and secret histories which are preserved and taught by modern mystical sects. It does not seem necessary to our purpose to either accept or reject these traditions, although their inclusion certainly would add glamour to the narration. The adept tradition in early Europe is traceable by natural means and normal faculties. If we are prepared to undertake the task and have access to the necessary reference material, it is quite possible to overlook or undervalue obscure details, but these do not impair, certainly they do not discredit the major premise. There is an incontrovertible mass of evidence indicating the existence of initiated philosophers possessing a superior knowledge of divine and natural laws. There is also sufficient proof that these initiates were the agents of a world fraternity or brotherhood of adepts that has existed from the most remote time. This over-fraternity has been called the Philosophic Empire, the Great School, the College of the Holy Spirit, and the invisible government of the world. References to this sovereign body of the ancient ones of the earth occur in the sacred writings, the philosophical literature, and the mystical traditions of all races and nations of mankind. We have selected from the most reputable sources vestiges relating to the Academy of the Adepts. The reader is invited to consider these fragments, to examine their contents, and to discover for himself the veritable accounts which they conceal. We believe that the thoughtful and discriminating student will have little difficulty in recognizing the essential landmarks. We further believe that he will come to understand why we have referred to the stream of the secret doctrine as humanism. Hear that? The secret doctrine, humanism. And isn't that what Alice Bailey believed in, and many of the other occultists, which I'm going to get into here? The term is not used in its popular sense, but to describe the grand program of the mystery schools for the emancipation of man from bondage to ignorance, superstition, and fear. And for those that don't know and that haven't done the study on it, or even listened to Bill Cooper go over some of Manly Hall's writings, you'll find out that ignorance, superstition, and fear have really to do with the three major departments of the old world order that the mystery schools seek to eradicate from this earth. The nation-state, the nation-state religion, the especially Orthodox Christianity, and etc. And how can I put this? And shackling the mob, getting rid of what they call mob rule and whatnot, because it was these institutions that they write in their writings persecuted them back in the Middle Ages, so it's kind of their revenge. Civilization is unfolding according to a predetermined plan. Predetermined plan. And not by accident, a fortuitous circumstance, which is what CNN and your mainstream media and stuff want you to believe. This plan does not limit the individual to any creed or doctrine, but invites him to recognize those essential disciplines by which he can attain eternal security for himself and can contribute to the final emancipation of all men. The adepts are the philosophic elect, the priests kings, and the shepherds of the herds of human souls. These shepherds, see, they consider themselves the shepherds, the masters. During enlightened ages, they have appeared as venerated teachers, social reformers, seers, and prophets. In benighted times, their leadership has taken on various appearances, but its substance is unchanging and unchangeable. We have distinguished three important divisions in the European descent of the mysteries. First, the orders of the quest. Second, the orders of the great work. And third, the orders of universal reformation. The first group was dedicated to the restoration of the secret sciences through search and discovery. The second group was devoted to the proof and personal accomplishment of that which was known to be true. And the third group was resolved to apply the proven principles of the esoteric tradition to the enlargement, restoration, and reformation of collective society. If the reader may wonder why we do not attempt to reveal the names, lives, and particular accomplishments of the masters of the quest, in this way supplying glamorous biographies of real or suspected adepts of the period, let him pause for a moment and consider. These initiates neither required nor desired the aggrandizement of their persons. Like all worthy men and women, they preferred to be honored through their work and submerged their identities in their programs so completely that their personalities had become one with their principles. Such biographical material as is available is nearly always mythical and symbolical. What we take to be an account of the men themselves is merely the record of their advancement in the sacred orders. Well, they keep themselves secret because, their identity is a secret because, it protects them in case people do wake up and go after the culprits of all this chaos that's been going on for a very long time, and all this trouble. In later centuries, we have some details about the initiates, but during the period of the quest, we do well indeed if we can identify certain outstanding humanists with the secret societies, which were the proper custodians of the Great Descent. Our purpose is accomplished if we can convey some general realization of the motions of the philosophic empire, from the complete secrecy of its origin to its final emergence as the natural government of the world. Manly Palmer Hall, Los Angeles, California, March 1949. So, this book is not in the best shape. Let me get a drink of water real quick. Some of it's falling out, so. The Adepts, Orders of the Quest, and Sons of the Widow. In the 3rd century after Christ, the Persian mystic, born in the faith of Zoroaster, however you want to pronounce it, Zoroaster, Zoroastrianism, I have a hard time pronouncing it anyways, and inspired by the doctrines of the Chaldeans, preached a religious philosophy which is to influence the entire course of Western civilization. Manes, or Menai, proclaimed himself the Paraclete, the comforter promised by Christ to his disciples. The true name of this Persian sage was Shu-Rake, in Latin, Cubricus. Cubricus. So, look that up. And the other name, Shu-Rake, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, or Shur-Ake, Shuraik. So look those two up, if you want. But after his initiation, he took the name Manes, which according to Plutarch means the anointed. Manes, the founder of the Manichaean sect, was born in Babylon AD 215 to 216. He received his early education from his father, a devoutly religious man, whose spiritual convictions were influenced by Mandean, Gnostic, and Christian associations. There are also indications that both father and son had a familiarity with the teachings of Sabianism. Later, Manes traveled extensively, was a voluminous writer, and a profound student of the religions of Jeez, I'm having trouble here. Transoxiana. That's spelled Transoxiana. Transoxiana. That's how best I can do. India and Western China. Manes was an initiate of the mysteries of Mithras, and among his teachers was Terebinthus, an Egyptian philosopher and magician. There is a tradition that Manes was at one time a Christian, but this the church has emphatically denied. It is certain, however, that he contacted early heretical sects and was also cognizant of the Kabbalistical speculations of the Jewish mystics. He regarded the philosophical system of the pagan sages as superior to both Judaism and primitive Christianity. He proclaimed his own ministry at the court of the Persian king Shapur I, AD 240 to 242, possibly on the coronation day of that monarch. The career of the prophet Manes made many demands upon his courage and devotion, but he faced the disasters of his life sustained by eternal visions and mystical experiences. He was unable to maintain a favorable position in the Persian court due to the pressure exerted against him by the priests of Zoroaster. He acquired some distinction as a physician, but his skill was not sufficient to preserve the life of one of the sons of the ruling prince. His prestige undermined, Manes was exiled to the contrivances of the Mazdeans, and he undertook his memorable journeys. During the same period, he lived for a year in a cave with only wild herbs for food. Later, Manes was recalled to Persia by a more generous prince, was received with great honors, and a palace was erected for his youth. For a brief time, his fortunes flourished, and he was consulted on important matters of state. But when Bahram I ascended the throne, the prophet fell upon evil times. Bahram, for political reasons, supported the Zoroastrian clergy, and these were resolved to destroy the heretical sect and its founder. Manes was crucified and flayed alive, AD 276 or 277, and his body was exposed to various indignities. The doctrine of Manes was rooted in Persian dualism, but he drew essential dogmas from the various schools of southern Europe, Mesopotamia, North Africa, and Central Asia. The Manichaeans practiced the sacraments of baptism and communion. They accepted the ministry of Christ, but not the divinity of Jesus. Manes condemned the Christians as worshippers of idols, declaring that they had substituted men for gods, and then images for men. The sect, however, admired St. Paul and acknowledged Jesus impatibilis, the Christ within that was the hope of glory. After the death of Manes, the progress of the sect was entrusted to his circle of initiates. And though these define the degrees of the order, its initiatory rites, signs, symbols, and passwords. The broad, esoteric foundation of Manichaeism appealed to scholars of all beliefs, including the better-informed Christians. Solomon Reinach gives the following valuable summary of the history of the sect. Quote, "The Manichaeans were gentle and peaceable persons. This was the opinion of the Greek philosopher Libanius. But, as they rejected the rights of existing churches and claimed to confine themselves to the ministrations of their own priests, those of other religions persecuted them furiously and excited the mob against them by calumnies. When it was first attacked in Persia, Manichaeism spread toward Turkestan, India, and China, and at the same time towards Africa by way of Syria and Egypt. Diocletian prohibited it in AD 290, and the Christian emperors from AD 377 onward legislated against it. The Vandals burned or exiled the Manichaeans. I don't know if I'm pronouncing some of these words 100% correct. I don't do too much research on the Manichaeans, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it is spelled Manichaeans. So it's either Manichaeans or Manichaeans or Manichaeans, I don't know, whatever. African Manichaeism is known to us chiefly through the works of St. Augustine, who wrote long treatises against its doctors and after having been their pupil. In the East, the sect was almost exterminated by the severity of Justinian, but it formed again in Asia Minor. We read of the Paulicians in Armenia, 7th to 12th century, the Bogomiles in Thrace, 10th to 11th century. This page. Byzantine emperors, Alexis Comnenus in particular, pursued these inoffensive sectaries with fire and sword. In the 11th century, Manichaeism, brought by the commerce of the Levant, penetrated into southern France and gave rise to the powerful sect of the Cathari, who were exterminated by the Inquisition. Hecathorn extends this history with many interesting details. He notes, quote, by changing its name, seat, and figurative language, Manichaeism spread in Bulgaria, Lombardy, France, the Cathari and Albigenses, Albigenses. Yeah, you see, that's another hard one for me. Albigenses. Albigenses, or however you put it, whatever. United with the Saracens and openly made war upon the emperor and its followers, perished by thousands in battle and at the stake. If from its secular trunk spring the so-called heresies of the Hussites and Wycliffites, which opened the way for Protestantism. The same author then establishes the Templars and Freemasons in the Manichaean descent and concludes by showing how their doctrines were echoed in the songs of the troubadours and the covenants of the guilds. From the societies, fraternities, and orders which perpetuated the esoteric doctrine of the Manichaeans, we gain considerable insight into the essential teachings of the sect. They believed in a primitive religion ever existing in the world, of which former theologies were corrupted forms. They held that enlightened and purified love was the highest of human emotions and manifested as a simple and natural love for God in heaven above and for man on the earth below. The practical religion of love was expressed through kindliness, friendliness, tolerance, and patience. The wise man became the protector or father of those less informed than himself. Only those who truly loved their fellow men and proved that affection through the defense of the rights of man were entitled to regard themselves as religious. The secret assemblage of the Manichaeans was dedicated to the liberation of the human being from all despotism and tyranny. The end to be attained was an enduring brotherhood of mankind, brotherhood of man, which we know through the esoteric writings of these secret societies and stuff is another word, code word for the New World Order, for world socialism. Men should be ruled by love alone and should love their rulers. Leaders should deserve this affection, and all kingdoms and nations should dwell together in peace, governed by just laws and noble examples. All tyranny must end, all false doctrines must fall, when the light of truth, the Christ within, is acknowledged as the universal Redeemer. Christ within is the same as the God within. Man is God. That's what they believe. So that'll be the religion of the New World Order. St. Augustine was drawn to Manichaeism because it interpreted the Christian religion in terms acceptable to his inquiring mind. He had already decided that the church was ridden with superstition and lacked philosophic depth. He remained absorbed in this so-called heresy for 9 years, but was never able to penetrate deeply enough into the mysticism of the sect to overlook the shortcomings of the members. Certainly his subsequent opinions were influenced by his associations with the followers of Mainz. He departed from them through a disinterest in mysticism for which his intellect was not suited. The church, in the treatment of the Manichaeans, followed its usual procedure of accusing all heretical groups of practicing immoral and infernal rites. St. Augustine, who had an intimate knowledge of the sect, made no such accusations. His temperament would have inclined him to do so had there been any reasonable grounds. After departing from the heresy of Mainz, St. Augustine came under the influence of Bishop Ambrose, a fine and noble man addicted to the teachings of Origen. Origen now stands precariously on the borderline of heresy, for he himself was influenced by Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and incredible as it may seem, by the doctrine of Mainz. Some of the writings of Mainz have survived, and from them we learn their concept of the divine nature. Quote, the Spirit of God is light, radiant with the virtue of love, faith, fidelity, high-mindedness, wisdom, meekness, knowledge, understanding, mystery, and insight, unquote. Leo the Great decided that such a belief should be stamped out lest the creed of the church be extinguished. This pontiff also found it embarrassing to contemplate the idea that in the spiritual succession Jesus was succeeded by Manes, who was the last and greatest of the prophets emanated from the divine, and who was the ambassador of the light of the world. One of the annual rites of the Manichaeans was celebrated to commemorate the crucifixion of the prophet. This consisted of placing a chair on a platform with 5 steps. Those members of the order who had purified themselves for the occasion were permitted to kneel before this empty chair, which symbolized the unseen master of their sect. This empty chair is reminiscent of the vacant throne of Osiris in the Egyptian initiatory ritual. The followers of Manes were called the sons of the widow, and the founder himself was referred to as the widow's son. It's a Freemasonic connection there. The popular story that Manes gained this title by being redeemed from slavery by a rich widow is about as plausible as the legend that the Order of the Garter was created in honor of the Countess of Salisbury's Garter. Horus, the savior god of the Osirian mysteries of Egypt, was a widow's son. He was posthumously conceived by the Holy Spirit of Osiris, his murdered father. The ghost of Osiris overshadowed his sister wife Isis, who had dressed herself in widow's weeds to lament her dead husband. Horus, thus strangely and immaculately conceived, was destined to become the hero of the world and the avenger of his father. In fact, it was believed by some that Horus was possessed by the spirit of his own father. The hieroglyphic of Osiris is the all-seeing eye, combined with the empty throne. Isis is the virgin of the world, who bears the divine child without the loss of her virginity. She is the esoteric tradition which gives birth to the adepts by a mystery in the spirit. She is the Sophia of the Gnosis, the blessed Demoiselle of the troubadours and the later mystics. In Christian and Neo-Christian symbolism, Sophia appears again as the bride of the Lamb. That's an earful probably, but yeah, Isis and Osiris. Isis is the womb. Horus is the body of it. And in the esoteric language of the mystery schools and some of the literature that I found, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and this is verified by Bill Cooper. I heard it from Bill Cooper, but then I did verify it myself through reading the stuff. That was true. That Osiris was the doctrine, Isis was the church, and Horus, conceived by both the doctrine and the church, was the body of initiates sent out into the world to, do their thing, whatever. But yeah, so that's what Manly P.L. was talking about when he said that she is the esoteric tradition. I might have, yeah. Anyways, Manes therefore was not literally a widow's son, for his father survived to assist in his education. He had attained the second birth, that is, he had been born out of the womb of the mysteries, and those of his followers who had received the initiation were identified in the same way. By his martyrdom, Manes became another Osiris, Lord of the empty throne. He overshadowed his order as a spirit, and from the sanctuary of Manes were born new sons to extend his doctrines, thus becoming in a mystical sense the re-embodiment of himself. Deprived of their master, the body of the Manichaeans was appropriately symbolized by the legend of Isis mourning for her martyred lord. And that's about it for that. I'll be on page 15 so far. So, okay, so, yep, nothing else to really, I'm trying to think of something else I could share before I go, but nope, I got plenty of videos to make, so I'll show them then. So, take care. Thank you. Take care.